Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A. My name is Sarah Mitchell and I'm the Director of Customer Success. And today we're going to talk about maps. Before I get into that, I need to do a quick check. Can you guys see and hear me? Because I'm flying solo right now. Yes, excellent. All right, perfect, fabulous, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Um, I am supposed to be joined by Scott Allen. I don't know when he's going to join me, but he will be handling some of the question piece, reviewing your questions as you write them in. As we do this presentation today, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into questions panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. And at any time, if you want to send a question in during the week, or if you feel like your question is too long to put in the questions pane, go ahead and email it to guides@alphasoftware.com. So, maps. Maps are something that we've had for a very long time. The first map dates all the way back to Babylonian times. This is a picture of it. And those early maps didn't necessarily offer any kind of utility. They often were used to tell stories. However, as time progressed and people got more sophisticated about maps, we came up with systems for actually charting this information and finding a utility with it. So instead of just being a storytelling tool, it became something we use to navigate. And over time, that navigation has gotten very sophisticated. We have Google Maps now. You say, hey, I'm here, I need to go there. You punch in the information. It says, all right, well, here's your options. How do you want to get there? Do you want to walk? Do you want to bike? Do you want to take the train? It's gotten very sophisticated. And in addition to not only providing directions, maps have gone as far as being able to provide other information. So cities will use maps to get information about tree canopy cover in their in neighborhoods. We have maps that display weather. We have maps that talk about earthquakes, where fault lines exist, probabilities of, risk of having an earthquake, so on and so forth. So a map isn't no longer just this thing, this toy at times, or a storytelling tool. It's become a utility that says so much more about data, about where we're at, about what's going on around us, even doing stuff like taking population information, density, that kind of stuff, and graphing it on a map provides so much insight. And it's really one of the first visual tools we had for plotting data. Think about charts and graphs. Maps are a form of displaying that data. So why are we talking about maps? Well, Alpha Anywhere has map integration in it, and not just the ability to display a map, but to capture GPS information, do searches on geographical data in a database, and all of that can be built into your apps in unique ways that you may not have thought of, or maybe you have map information that you want to utilize in your apps. So today we're going to talk about just a very basic introduction to what's available in Alpha Anywhere, and talk about how you can utilize the Google Maps piece in your apps and what is needed to get started there. So we talk about maps, there's usually three things that come up. Maps, GPS being a global positioning system, it's your lat, longitude, location on the Earth. And then GIS, graphical information systems, or geography information systems, which is more of a study of taking things like road information, building layouts, and that kind of stuff, putting it in a map, and then doing some deep investigation in that data and kind of discovering things that you may not have previously known. So with Alpha Anywhere, some of the key features that we have integration with the Google Maps API, which lets you do things like plot locations, generate routes either between two locations or a number of locations. You can geocode addresses, and we'll talk about why that's important. We can also generate static maps, which can be embedded in lists and such. But in addition to that piece that's very visual, we have something on the back end that isn't necessarily visual, but is extremely powerful and has been on the product for a while, and that's called geography searching. And we have a whole slew of portable SQL functionality that you can use to search geographic data, find all locations in an area, generate objects that cover an area and that kind of stuff. And that's all built into all of our searching utilities, one place that you're going to see that kind of more dominantly than other places is just right straight in the grid component. And we'll talk about that when we get there. The other thing we have is GPS integration. So you can use a GPS thing, the GPS in a mobile device, to capture a user's location, track their location over time, and with that information do cool things like maybe you only want to allow someone to submit a record, maybe they're out doing inspections, and you only want them to be able to upload that information if they are physically located within a certain distance of the address they should be at. You can actually utilize the GPS integration in Alpha Anywhere to verify that person is where they are supposed to be before allowing them to do some kind of submission. You can also capture their location when they do the submission to verify on the back end if they were actually there or not. So there's a lot of power with that that integration. And so some of the places that we have this, that it's very easy and obvious to find, the first one that comes up is grids. Now, grids are an older component in the product. They were one of the first interfaces built with the eye on web and then eventually mobile. But they have something that's called an alternate view, Google Maps alternate view. And all the alternate view is another way to look at your information from that table in the grid as a map. So here we've got a picture up here on the side here would be the list of grid records. They're cut off here, but here on this side, these are all the data points. This is where that information is plotted. And because it's in this format, you can do searches on it. So you can actually turn on the search part for the grid and then provide an interface to search on this information based on location. Another place that we have a map is the map control in the UX, and most people are going to be building their apps with the UX component, especially if you're going to go the mobile route because it's the only component that supports mobile. We do not recommend using a grid on mobile, mostly because it doesn't support the touch interface actions. But with the map control, it has a lot of stuff you can do with it through Action JavaScript. We have plotting markers, plotting routes, getting driving directions. So we'll take a peek at that today. And then also with maps, we also have the ability to put a static map in a list, display a list as a map, and then also use lists to populate other map controls that exist in our app. And there was supposed to be a picture here, but I forgot to include it. So before you can do anything with the Google Maps API, the first thing you're going to need is an API key. Now you can do some stuff without an API key. It's going to be covered in like developer edition only. Everything's grayed out. You're going to get warnings or errors in the console that you don't have an API key to make the call. So if you plan on providing maps in your app, you're going to have to do this. And the way you create an API key is you go to consoledevelopers.google.com, and this may or may not require creating a billing profile the first time you go there. But you're going to go there and you're going to create a new project. If you don't have one, there will be a button somewhere on the screen to create a project. So this one's just called My Project. It's got a random number on it. But once you have that project, you're going to have this API services dashboard. And up here on this, it's going to be in the center of the screen. But right next to that header, there's this Enable APIs and Services. You can get to the same place by clicking on Library, but going there, you can then go through everything that is offered by Google and add the appropriate APIs to your project. So you have to do this first before you can make the API key, because Google needs to know what it is that that API key is going to access. So right here on the category, you can click on Maps to filter. But the main one everyone's going to probably add first is the Maps JavaScript API. This is what we use in Alpha Anywhere to do all the map stuff with the map control. There are a few others. There's the geocoding and the static maps API. If you need to use geocoding or you want to take advantage of the static maps feature, you do have to add that API to your Google project. However, once you've found one of these, you click on it, it's going to have a button here that says Enable. Here's some other options that you might want to consider adding. You definitely need the JavaScript one, that's what we use. So you turn that on, and that gets added to your project. So once you have added that API to your project, you can then go to credentials and create a credential. And the specific credential you need to create is an API key. That's what gets entered in Alpha Anywhere in your project settings or directly in the map controls itself. This process is pretty straightforward. You click API key from this create credentials menu. It's going to show you your API key that it's generated. At this point, you can copy it, which is what you need to add to the project, but you could also choose to go to this restrict key option or edit this later. And in here, there's a bunch of additional configurations you can use. You can lock down who can access the API key, what HTTP refer is making that call. You can say maybe it's only usable in your Android or iOS apps. You can also restrict the APIs that the key has access to. So if you're using Google services, other ones that in addition to Maps, it may be a good idea to restrict your Google Map API key to only those map APIs so that it's not also able to be used for other things you may not want that API key to use. So this is in the additional configuration. You can get there by just clicking on the API key up here in credentials. There'll be a list of API keys here. You can click on that name, it'll go into the edit. You can always come back in here too and copy the key out if you've lost it or forgot it. So that's the setup. And then once you have that, you need to come into the web project properties. This is where we recommend you put things, but you need to paste that API key into the Google Maps API key option here. And that's going to be in this JavaScript library section. And right below that, you're going to see two other API key things. You're going to see the one for static maps and one for geocoding. You have to put the API key in all of those places if you plan to use those services. But that's the basic setup. And so once you have that set up and running, you're ready to start experimenting with all of these things. And that's what we're going to do today. So I've put together this basic demo. It's got a list in it. It's got a map in it. It's got a text box and a button. And these things, I just wanted to demonstrate very simply what it is that you can do some of the more basic stuff with maps. So here's a list on the left-hand side. It's got a bunch of markers on it. This is a list with addresses in it displayed as a map. And then over here on this side, we've just got a map centered on this location in Springfield. Nothing on it. You can see you can interact with it. Same here. Interact with it, zoom out. But up here, which you can't really see because it's black, but there's this plot location thing. So we could do something like 1 Main Street, Boston, MA. This may or may not be an actual location, and it is. So there's a map. Clicking this plots that address from here. You can zoom all the way in. Looks like there's a Domino's Pizza nearby. So setting these things up is actually very straightforward and pretty easy. We'll take a look at the list first. So this list is built off of static data. I created the list by clicking add control, and I located the list control and added it to my app. But the static data here is actually static data that we have built into the sample data selection. So I've picked geographic data. And what's in here is there's a name, there's a city, a state, and there's a latitude and a longitude. So if you plan on plotting a lot of data on a map, it's very strongly encouraged that you are plotting latitude and longitude values. And the reason for that is because Google requires geoencoding those addresses before it can even plot it on a map, which is more expensive than just plotting the longitude values. So if you plan on doing something like displaying a bunch of locations on a map like this is showing in this list, you definitely want to geocode your data. There are ways to do that very easily in Alpha Anywhere. We have an article on how to quickly geocode a bunch of addresses in your database if you haven't done it before. And we have all the tools built in for doing that. So working with lat long, you're going to have more freedom in the number of API calls you can make. Also with some services like directions, you can actually get more locations in if you use a lat long than you can with an address. So this information didn't change anything here. the only stuff that was really set up in this list is I came down here into the list properties and I changed the layout type to a map. So if you click on this drop down, there's a bunch of little options in here, and one of them is map. And if you turn on map, you're going to get this map layout settings option. And then in here is where you can configure everything. So with a list, when you're setting up the map, the way you configure all these settings is actually with JavaScript, but we have some helpful information in here that I'd like to point out to you that kind of helps you get things right. So I think the only thing you actually need to set is lat, longitude, or address. These other ones are all optional, although I do recommend that you do something like maybe provide a marker title, so when you mouse over it or click it, it can display some information about what that marker is. But in here, you're going to find these big blocks of comments at the top. This is my code down here that I added. But in here, there's going to be this thing that talks about the data object. So data is the data for the current row in the list, and it's going to have all of the information for that row in there. And that information is inside variables that have these names. So in the case of this list, it has a name, a city, state, latitude, and longitude that are all available to me. This is case sensitive, so that's important to know when you're working with this data in JavaScript. But from this, I have latitude and longitude. The function latitude, longitude, or address either needs to return a latitude, longitude as an array or an address as a string. If you have the latitude and longitude, use it. If you don't, you can use the address. The address needs to be the street, the city, the state, or country, whatever is needed to pinpoint that location. So these two examples here show that, how you would do that. Here we're returning an array with our data.latitude and data.longitude. And that's all we need to specify where those markers are going to appear for our list data. The second one that I've set in here is the marker title, and this is what's shown when you mouse over the marker. I believe it may also be displayed if you click on it. But this can really be anything you want. It's going to be a label for the marker. So they could all say the same thing, my marker or label. In this case, I've created the name, the city, and the state as a string by adding them together and then including some spaces here. Here's a space and here's a comma space. Again, that data object information is right here for your convenience. And we have a little bit of an example here of how you could, what you may want to do with that information. There are a bunch of other settings in here, also all set with JavaScript. Some of them let you do things like make the marker interactive. So by default, the markers can't be moved. But if you wanted to provide a way for someone to grab a marker that's been plotted and move it, you could come here and set the marker as draggable. And this either returns true or false. This could be a computation. Maybe markers can only be moved if the record hasn't been finalized or something like that. That's really up to you to decide here. We also have a bunch of overlay stuff, marker names, group names, which are used in JavaScript calls into the map itself. There's ways to retrieve like a group of markers or look up a marker by name and do stuff with it with the map object that is associated with the map. We also have an option to display a detailed view. This is HTML, but there are methods to pull that data from something else. So maybe you would like to display an editable detail view. What this could do when you click on it is pull up a pop-up window that has all the controls in it to edit stuff for your list, and then when you're done, it closes it. So that's a place where you could inject that code. And then a whole bunch of events down here, all associated with the map. So there's a lot you can do in here. Something important to know is that if you go to the list layout tab and you've got a map, a list that's a map, there's not going to be anything in here because you don't configure the map settings here. So that all happens here in the list properties. So we go back and we zoom in here, and as we mouse over these guys, there's our name and the city and state for each one of these markers. This other piece here, this is our just our map control, and configuring the map control itself is a bit different. Instead of working with JavaScript, you do have a whole bunch of settings here, check marks, checkboxes, drop downs, configurations for picking what type of map that you want to display, how you interact with it. This is all configured here in this property grid. It has events as well, like what happens if you click on it. I believe if markers are draggable, there is an event you can hook to capture the marker's new location. Though that does escape me right now, but you can do a lot with this as well. The thing about this map though is that it starts out like completely empty. So if you want to use this to display information in a particular area, you're gonna have to set up information like, do you want it centered in a specific location when it first opens? I picked an arbitrary random address. I think it was like 1 Main Street, Springfield, Illinois, to populate this center latitude and longitude. The nice thing is if you don't have the geocode information, you can just enter the address in here and geocode it, and then you're good to go. Some other things in here you may be interested in, there is an optimized route waypoints that is used if you're plotting driving directions, which you probably want to compute the optimal route if you have a bunch of different destinations you want someone to go to, so that they're not, so you're maximizing their time and minimizing waste. And then also a bunch of other stuff like, do you want to avoid highways, tolls? Lots of settings that you see with Google Maps are directly accessible here. With respect to adding stuff to this map, that's done through Action JavaScript, and the Action JavaScript that we've built around maps is called Google Map Method. And Google Map Actions, it needs a map, but we have a whole bunch of actions available to you. So it would be extremely ambitious to try to demonstrate every single one of these things for you. But just to give you an idea, you can add a marker to the map, multiple markers. You can show or hide markers, remove markers. When you remove a marker, that's an instance where you need the marker name. So that marker name identifies your markers. If you add one, his marker name marker one, then that's information you need to know to remove it. You can add KML layers to a map. So KML is a markup, an overlay markup that you can do stuff in. Like maybe you want to display a map that shows all of the zip codes in a city. You could add a KML overlay on that contains all that information of where those zip codes are, and then display it in your map. You can plot routes. Route plotting supports both single address and multiple addresses. And of particular note is in the next release, there's this new event that we added, in part spurred from our DevCon sessions this year, that lets you perform JavaScript additional processing on the route that comes back. Maybe you want to figure out what the waypoint order is for driving those locations. You could take that and then use that information to generate a report or something. That's something to look out for in the next release. And then this last one, which is very interesting, is getting a pointer to the Google Map object. So while we have Action JavaScript to do a whole bunch of stuff with the Google Map, and we tried to capture everything we think people would want to do, there may be situations where you just want to do your own thing, you don't want to go through Action JavaScript, and you've got something that you want to customize, you can get a pointer to that Google Map object and make direct calls into the Google Map API yourself with JavaScript. So if you ever need to get that out, this is the action you can use. This map object variable name is the name of the JavaScript variable that's going to contain your map pointer to the Google Map object, so keep that in mind. So, but that's what's in here. The particular example we demonstrated this earlier was I just got the address from this address field here and then plotted it on the map. While we're in here, I just wanted to point out a few other actions that we have. There's one called open a Google Map component. We have a component that's a map. That's not, I don't think that's available in Community Edition, and realistically, it doesn't make much sense to use the Google Map component when you could just put a map in a UX component and open that instead. But that's one of the actions in here. We also have geocode and address, which you give it a bunch of address information, and then it computes the lat and long and saves that in those fields. And in here, there's two options. There's the Google option, which requires that you have your geocoding API key, but there's also one for nometum. Sorry, nometum. Oh, can't talk today. So if you don't have a Google API key, you could use this route to geocode. It's just a different service. And both of these options are also available in XBasic functions on the back end. So if you need to do something on the server, that's available to you. And then also geolocation functions. And so this is interesting. So geolocation functions let you restore, capture information about the location of the browser. In the case of a mobile app, it's going to be the device. But from this, you can do something like capture someone's location continuously, if you'd like. This is the update data on location change. So if you enable this, every time the user's location change, this gets triggered, you capture a new location. So through this action, you can actually do something like track somebody's travel over time. And in a world where we're all wearing Fitbits and location trackers all the time, that might actually be something that you might want to consider integrating if it's important for your app to have that kind of functionality. So don't want to save these changes. So that's what we've got. It is an overview. I want to keep this pretty simple today. We can send out this component after the webinar if people want access to it. I also wanted to share with you in documentation, we have map control. And there is an article in here about how to get your Google Maps JavaScript API key if you need a review for that. And I will grab that link for you. And the chat window. So I would like to open this up for questions. I know we talked about maps, but really you guys are welcome to ask any question about Alpha Anywhere that you would like. And I also see that I've got two assistants lurking in the background.
Hello,
Welcome,
this is
Scott.
Hi. Yeah, I'm here. I would love to help you answer questions. There don't seem to be any yet in the question window, but if folks want to enter some in, now is a good time to do that. I had a question, if you don't mind
Oh, sure.
considering it. So you were mentioning geolocation, and with that, you can tell where a user's phone is in a space. If you wanted to, say, allow the user to use their phone to find all of the available locations that are in the database, like that are nearest them, and then plot the route to those spaces, How would something like that be done?
Ah, yes. All right. So, uh, and this is something I do want to do a webinar on in the future, geography searching. So I will find it. Geos are portable. I did not move them here yet. There we go. Portable SQL functions for geography. So, and we have examples for this, so I'll get that information out. Maybe put a link in the YouTube description after this webinar. But we have a bunch of geography functions that you can use in search. And unfortunately, I couldn't, um, I have a grid where this is all set up and I couldn't find it before today's webinar. But what you can do with those searches is there's this function called within like radius, and radius is some distance. And so what you could do is say like my location is here and I want to find all the locations in my data that are within this area as a radius. You could also provide a polygon, which would be like a rectangle or a square. But this is all done through um, geography functions that actually exist in SQL databases. So I think MySQL, uh, definitely SQL Server, and a few others all have a way to store geographical information in them and also provide functions for searching that data. And so through portable SQL, you could use something like geolocation is within radius, where that location is within, 10 miles of myself. And we do have examples of this with alternate views. I think it's this one, so I'll put that in the chat. Now this video is going to be older. It's going to be using an older version of Alpha Anywhere, but it still applies today. So, but using that search interface basically through Portable SQL is how you would search for that info, and that can be used with the list.
Neat. We do look like, let's see here. Someone in the group said Google API services notice a ton of Google A5 API template files in a folder under the A5 install location. Where is the documentation on how to use those?
I don't know what the Google A5 API template file is. I would have to investigate that to get you more information. But do send us an email to guys@alphasoftware.com so we can check that out for you.
Okay, no other questions at the moment.
All right. So with respect to mapping, we have a lot of features. Some of them we've shown a lot of, like lists with maps and the map control. But I would like to get a feel for how interested people are in the geography searching piece, and if they want to learn more about how they would do that with their data. I guess you could type in the chat window yes, no, maybe. Because we have lots of examples around the grid, but we do not have a lot of examples around a list. And I think that's a piece that a lot of people would find helpful if they knew how to do it.
We're getting some affirmatives here.
Oh, it's a very popular idea. All right, that's fantastic.
Yes.
I will put it on our list. Something we are doing, and Scott, maybe you can point people to this direction, but we are publicizing in advance what our topics are. We have all of our topics for this this month lined up, ready to go. Next week, we actually have a guest speaker coming in. Robin Bennett's going to be doing a presentation on 10 super cool things that you can do with Alpha Anywhere. Robin Bennett is the director at Start Software, so we're excited to have him come and do a presentation. You may have seen him at past DevCons or even met him at a DevCon before. He's fantastic presenter, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to do. And
Yeah,
then
me too.
after that, following that presentation, Dion and I will be doing back-to-back presentations on web services, specifically making your own and how you get the authentication piece built so that only those people who are approved to use your API can access it.
Yes, yeah, and I'll say just as a quick plug, as you mentioned, we are pushing out information about the webinars before they occur, like on our Facebook page, on our Twitter channel there. So everything, you you will be notified about what the upcoming shows are, but then also you will start seeing some posts about what is currently available on the YouTube channel. So we're trying to get them up there as quick as possible after the recordings are done of all these webinars. But hopefully by the end of the week, and if not by the end of the week, early the following week, you should be able to find these webinars on our YouTube channel. So keep a lookout for those in case you missed something or wanted to, catch up and watch it again.
Thank you. And then for sure, I think Dave is here. I wanted to ask him this question. I believe we're going to send out a new meeting link for 2022 to register for these webinars.
That's yet to be determined. We may also just extend the one that we have here
And
so that
extend the one.
it's
Yeah, I know in the
convenient.
past
Yeah,
that we've done a new one. So just to keep a heads up on that, we'll try to make
exactly.
sure everybody knows about that
Yeah.
as well.
Sarah, that was terrific. Thanks so much for presenting today. Scott, thanks for filling in as MC. I got called away at the last minute, so you did an awesome job there. If anyone does have any other questions, go ahead and send them to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. And until then, we hope to see you at our next webinar. Take care and stay well. Thanks. Bye-bye.